we all can imagine that if you ask an entrepreneur, what are the skills that are important for you to thrive? They would mention creativity, problem solving, grit. Like at some point, you just need persistence to push yourself through, ability to talk to a stranger, figure out what the challenges are, have that empathy. So we know these skills that come up more and more in research on entrepreneurs. Um, and these skills can be taught is also something that economics research has told us, education and psychology research has told us in last 20 years really well, that these skills are malleable. They are not something that people are born with. You can build these skills in young children.
Entrepreneurship is usually discussed as a business skill, but today's conversation is really about something deeper: how curiosity, creativity, and problem solving are shaped long before someone starts a company. Our guest today has explored that question across classrooms, governments, grassroots programs, and now at Brown University. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the university ecosystem for over 12 years. For our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that. I'm Harish, your host today. Joining us is Saloni Gupta, and she's the Jonathan Nelson Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Education at Brown University. And her work focuses on the intersection of education, innovation, and economic development. Saloni, really excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Harish.
Great. So, your journey genuinely feels impossible to summarize in one line. Software engineer, teacher, entrepreneur, policy consultant, researcher, and now professor at Brown. Uh, was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, this career path makes absolutely no sense anymore?
It wasn't, you don't see the path, you just see the next step. I think what my career was, how my career was built was essentially I tried something and I realized there are limitations to my intellectual capacity being harnessed in that step. Um, and I wanted to try something different or try something uh, bigger or stronger. And that essentially became the guiding force for the next step. So when I was a software engineer, I started volunteering in a slum in Bangalore, with which is an Anganwadi. Um, and I figured my engineering problems are not as hard as actually a policy implementation problem. On paper, early childhood centers should work, but in reality, they don't. And to actually make them work is incredibly hard. Not just like, oh, state is not doing enough, but it is also about how resources get distributed, how get consumed, and so on. So that was like the starting step. And subsequently, um, every time I tried something, this is what I learned.
Very well said. So you've worked everywhere from juvenile homes in India to global research institutions. So what experience changed the way you think about education and entrepreneurship the most?
Oh, this is a very deep question. Thank you for asking that. Uh, See, I think again, it is a journey of which sector you start to work in and where do you land, and they could be very different. But in the hindsight, you can see how all of these are connected very well. What we know for almost 150, 200 years now, since the first treatise of economics came into being, we know that innovation and entrepreneurship is the engine of growth for every country. And somehow, because how the schools are set up, we focus on basic literacy and numeracy. We focus on the skills that can make you a great workforce at labor, um, or make you a great labor, but may not make you a great entrepreneur. And it is such a easy disconnect that once you see it, you realize why we set it up like this. And it's just a historical way of how mass schooling was established in the US, how it spread all over the world. um, it was set up for industrial revolution. It was set up for people to be factory workers. And it hasn't really evolved. It has evolved into a college education and so on, but hasn't really evolved into K-12 education where kids can become entrepreneur. So if even when you're a teacher in a small juvenile home and or in a grade two classroom, you realize students are very creative. Like all of us were far more creative as a young person than we were as adults. Um, and so, if we're more creative and we could be more innovative, that is the time for our teachers and our education system to harness that ability in us. And somehow we lose it, right? And so, I think it is a very important topic and it doesn't receive enough attention. Um, Friends of mine who have been working in this sector, they have told me that you give a kid any small tool to work on and say, can you come up with an idea that can help solve a problem? And most students will be able to. It is not that uncommon for kids to be creative. We just don't give them enough opportunity. Even students who are not great at math and reading, the typical backbenchers, we know they are very creative. They're very street smart. Um, but we do not really know what to call that ability. We think they are not good enough, but they are good enough at something that we have not really paid attention to. And we don't measure very well. So we don't call this kid a smart kid. Because we are only measuring math and reading and 10th grade and 12th grade and college entrance exams and so on. Yeah.
Interesting. One thing I love in your work is that you treat creativity and problem solving almost like a economic infrastructure. So when did you start realizing that entrepreneurship is deeply connected to how people are taught, to think?
I have not really been able to create a very uh, good data on how creativity and problem solving lead to entrepreneurship. This is still my current work. But I think we all can imagine that if you ask an entrepreneur, what are the skills that are important for you to thrive? They would mention creativity, problem solving, grit. Like at some point, you just need persistence to push yourself through, ability to talk to a stranger, figure out what the challenges are, have that empathy. So we know these skills that come up more and more in research on entrepreneurs. Um, and these skills can be taught is also something that economics research has told us, education and psychology research has told us in last 20 years really well, that these skills are malleable. They are not something that people are born with. You can build these skills in young children. So if we know these skills matter for entrepreneurship and we do know these skills are malleable, it's just about a matter of like putting all of this together. So what I did in my research in India, um, is that there was a program working with students from residential schools. These are students who are from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Um, but as you can imagine, these kids are probably really great at creativity. Like they know how to use uh, a particular resource in multiple ways. They are so under resourced that they use each and every resource to its nth degree. Um, and so what this program was doing with these students, they asked them to go out in the community, solve a problem. So to give an example, if you're talking to an elderly person, I was like, what is the kind of issues that you face? And an elderly person says, like, I just forget my medication sometimes. But you don't forget your walking stick. So let me put a medicine pouch in your walking stick with an alarm clock. But while we are there, let me also add a GPS that if you get lost, we can also track you, right? Like this is an important thing for elderly. So they came up with a walking stick with all of these things coming together with a tiny alarm clock, with a tiny medicine pouch, and a GPS. And a simple walking stick became a solution for solving the problem of missing to take medications. Um, which means that kids have that ingenuity even in these low SES regions where students do not get enough exposure or the process of like learning. But if you just guide them a little bit, like imagine a classroom in a typical Indian school, you have a teacher who goes to the blackboard, she notes down certain things, the students like in a beautiful handwriting would copy. Then if she has solved x plus 2 is equal to 5, they will solve 20 problems of x plus 2 equal to 5 different types. So they learn procedural fluency, they learn how to write beautifully, but they don't really learn how to or express their problem solving ability. Even with mathematics, they're not solving their problem solving ability. They're mostly solving or expressing their procedural fluency. So now you give them this opportunity to go out in the community, solve a problem. They build those skills and they build the skill of empathy because they haven't talked to strangers like this. They build the skills of grit because you ask them to come up with ideas and they don't have enough resources to come up with ideas. So they tinker around with limited resources to come up with an idea. And the program I've been working with, they told me yesterday that they have filed patents for some of these students' ideas. So you can take a journey from just giving a small exposure to actually identifying a high talent which goes unidentified otherwise. There is a term in this in economics literature called lost Einsteins. People who could have become inventors, but they do not because we forgot to give them exposure when they were young. Like people who become inventors are also the ones who got the exposure. They lived in a community or family or a household where there was an inventor or somebody who has filed a patent. So the likelihood of a child to become an inventor is highly dependent on whether parents become an inventor or whether the parents were inventors. This is in the US context, but it is not driven by genetics. Like they were able to show that a parent filing a patent in a certain sector, like radio, the child's likelihood of filing a patent in radio is very high. Now, you can't have a radio gene. This is all coming from exposure, what they call dinner table capital. A parent and a child talking over dinner and discussing these things. These are the exposure channels. How kids become inventor in later in their adult life. And we lose that because parents from low income communities do not have that background. Kids do not have that background, and schools do not provide that kind of training. So I think it all comes together like that. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question completely or I just extended it to something broader.
No,
But
not at all. You answered my next question also. Amazing. So you've researched entrepreneurship, innovation, scaling systems, policies, and all. So I have to ask you this: uh, what who is harder to convince? Startup founders, policymakers, or academics?
In what context?
If I have to ask you, in fostering entrepreneurship or innovation.
Started founders are enthusiastic bunch, right? Like they come up with an open mindset. They're trying to solve a problem, uh, one particular problem. Policymakers, on the other hand, have a huge undertaking. They need to figure out how to set up a new program. And to set up a new program, you need to convince your frontline worker, like teachers, that, hey, we are going to push a new program, teach innovation to kids. While you also need to teach this math and English and make sure kids are actually doing really well in schools. Uh, so you've pushed, it is very hard for policymakers to achieve a program at that scale. You can do a small pilot. The program I evaluated was a randomized control trial in 40 schools. We had 80 schools. We randomly assigned 40 schools to the treatment. Now, to convince the government to now take this program that worked very well to a bigger scale is almost a challenging task. You need to find funding sources for this. You need to convince teachers to be able to deliver this. You need to figure out how you would monitor this and how the curriculum will be edited so that this program can be as young. So it's not that it's hard to convince policymakers. It is just that the challenge that they have is very different from a startup founder who is working on one single problem and is fundraising for that idea, build that product. For a startup founder to convince his his intended users is extremely hard. That's a problem the startup founder is experiencing. But for me to convince a startup founder that, hey, this is worth an idea pursuing, they usually are very enthusiastic bunch. Who was the third stakeholder in your question?
Academics.
Academics. Ah, academics are actually looking for very specific, like I think the academics are like, have become more and more siloed. So a lot of disciplines don't talk to each other. And the way one discipline works is very strict in how they do their research. And so you can do a research and education, but an econ audience or economics audience or a psychology audience would disagree with your method, with your question, with your way of collecting data, your way of analyzing data. They would not believe it. So for them, this is not rigorous enough. So for each discipline, the definition of rigor is different. So to convince an academician um, that this is the problem worth solving, or this is a research question worth pursuing, if they do not really see that it has been cumulatively built in their own discipline, and what you're proposing is then also can uh, be done very well, they would not be on board. So they are the hardest bunch to, yeah, by far, they're the hardest bunch to convince anyone anything.
Interesting. So, if you could redesign education, from scratch for the next generation, what's the first thing you would remove immediately?
I think I do not look at it from that point of view. I think we cannot just give up on systems that have been built for over the years. The reason why these systems are working is for a certain reason. Teachers have limited capacity. We, as a policymaker or researchers, we are not able to attract the best candidates into teaching. So to say that, oh, teachers are not delivering their material very well, or they're not teaching the same thing, a high quality teacher versus a low quality teacher, I want to get rid of low quality teachers. Like, There is no easy answer to this problem. So if you ask me, like, what is one thing you would remove, I think I would not immediately drop anything, but I think what I believe in is that you have to iterate with the system. This is a slow process. You cannot change anything drastically. You cannot replace something immediately. But the challenges are increasing manifold. Firstly, a teacher needed to, like, when you and I were young kids, teacher just needed to teach us a basic math and reading, and it was sufficient. Now a teacher needs to, reading and writing is not enough. AI can write better than anybody, or it is getting increasingly better at writing. An average student. So the challenge for teacher now is to not only teach students how to read and write, but read and write better than AI, or work with AI or collaborate with AI so that they can write more effectively, they can express their ideas more effectively. Same goes for engineering education, that we taught how to code, students how to code, and then they would go to their jobs, do some training, and start a job at Infosys or an IT company. But that is no longer enough. That kind of coding is now being automatically done by AI. So what the challenge for educators is becoming harder and harder. What students were learning in school is no longer enough, and they have to build those foundational skills. You can't skip that. You can't say that I'm not going to teach you how to write because AI can write. You need to build those skills, but you then also need to build these additional skills. How would you teach students all of that? It was already very hard. uh, so the challenges are growing, and so the systems need to respond, but I do not think it should be a drastic response, because that is a recipe for disaster. Uh, to give an example, like charter schools, when they started, they were really great in the US. Some of those schools really did a very good job. They were small scale, they were very effective. But then the movement grew so quickly and so drastically that you saw that, oh, there are so many challenges in charter school, and the model as an alternate model to mass schooling is kind of looked down upon now, that this is not highly successful. They affect students negatively, they affect public education negatively, and so on. So anything that is drastic or takes a huge, it's very quick growth, doesn't solve the problem. It has left some problems at the small scale that were unsolved, and when you quickly scale them, they are just bound to, those problems are also bound to multiply and scale. So that is how I look at the education system too, that you can't drastically change one thing. Yeah.
Very well said. So finally, for students watching right now who feel pressure to have everything figured out early, what would you want them to remember?
This is a very hard question. I do not know if I have an answer for today's students. I think they're just up for an extreme challenge in terms of learning. Um, I think the first thing I would like to tell them is just believe that you will be all right. Believe that everything will work out. It may seem very challenging, and then take one step at a time. I think there is, even in the world of AI, we know that there are a lot of people who are able to get past it. They're able to build their expertise along with AI. So any student who is, a 16-year-old and like, what should be my career now? Engineering, is it going to medicine? Is it becoming a singer or an artist? They all are facing the existential crisis that maybe you and I are not facing. We had our jobs, we found our path, and now we are good at our jobs. So we built some expertise already, but young people are yet to build that expertise in the choice of their career. And I think that is what I would give them an advice on. Like, whatever career you're choosing, figure out how to be an expert in it. What does it mean to be an expert in it? talk to those experts, learn that expertise. And in the end, any coursework you do, any college degree you get, those are just a window to what is all possible. They're not really going to build the expertise. The real expertise will be built by your own like hands. You have to do the work to build that expertise. And that I think is the most important thing. To stay grounded, it's just a very slow process. Again, you can't build it in one day. But as you build it, as you grow older, it will have very good returns. Yeah.
Amazing. So today's conversation wasn't just about entrepreneurship. It was about how curiosity, creativity, and problem solving are shaped long before someone builds a company, right? So huge thank you to you, Saloni, for being part of this episode and sharing such thoughtful insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Harish.
Great. And to everyone watching, if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you